Islam, meaning that he established his own entity. But he himself had not abandoned the theology, meaning that he still believed in the teachings, of Elijah Muhammad, but he felt that he could do better on his own, that he would not be restricted as to who he could associate with, so forth and so on. But he had not abandoned the theology. That's why he said in his speech and also in his letter, I had to make a choice between that and what Elijah Muhammad had been teaching us. He was in Ihram. He was in the sacred garb, standing in the precincts of Mecca when he actually made that statement, when he had his epiphany. He said, which was supposed to be Islam, and I accepted Islam as a religion that teaches brotherhood. And since then, I have not been identified with Elijah in any way, shape, or form. Muslims are taught, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the apostle of Allah, a messenger. This is when Malcolm actually, made the real conversion, beyond the Shahada certificate and so forth and so on. And that's why, go back to the red. You may be shocked by hearing these words coming from me. This is a letter he sent back to the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, and it was intercepted by James 67X because they were still under the theology. So Malcolm was saying, you're going to be surprised because I'm going to be different when I come back. And when James 67X read the letter, he was so afraid that they had lost their Malcolm that he concealed the letter for 7 days. He wouldn't even show it to the congregation. You see, so that's very important to understand that he had not left the theology. Now, here Malcolm says at the bottom that I very much doubt that 10 American citizens have ever visited Mecca. And I do believe that I might be the first American-born Negro to make the actual Hajj itself. This is Malcolm was thinking that I may be the first. But Al-Hajj Abdullah Rashid Ahmed, aka Nen Hope, who actually was a jazz artist prior, who sold over 3 million albums. He left the music industry for Islam, and he made Hajj in 1952. Malcolm made Hajj in 1964. He wasn't aware of that. Hajj Wali Akram, as I mentioned in the beginning, he made Hajj in 1957. He was the first American to receive a Hajj visa. Hajj Hassan, 1952. Hajj Talib, 1964. He's still alive. May Allah preserve him. And he has a grandson who is an Azhar graduate, Hafiz Quran. He sent him to Egypt to study. And my father made Hajj in 1964. MashaAllah. And Malcolm wasn't aware of that dynamics because he was isolated. Also, Malcolm received scholarships. Okay, the Muslim World League gave Malcolm, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated, scholarship so that he could take his students and send them abroad to study Islam. And this is Malcolm at the top, receiving his Islamic certification to teach Islam in America from Al-Azhar. And Sheikh Ahmed Hassoun at the bottom is from Sudan. He taught 33 years in Mecca. And he was assigned as Malcolm's personal teacher to come back and teach him. And Ella Collins, after Malcolm's assassination, she became the distributor of those scholarships. She actually left the Nation of Islam. Actually, Malcolm recruited her. She stayed in it for a few years. She left. She took her Shahada, and she called Malcolm out of that. And she paid for his expenses for Hajj. And the Islamic Society of Boston has honored her with the Ella Collins Institute. That's Malcolm's sister. And when my brother Imam Ali would go visit them, he had the privilege to sleep in the bed where Malcolm slept. He slept in Malcolm's room. And Tawfiq, Ahmed Tawfiq was the first recipient of that particular scholarship fund, mashallah. And the person who paid for Malcolm's teacher and funded the Muslim Mosque Incorporated was Muhammad Sarur Sabban. This is the person on the left. He was the assistant minister of finance of Saudi Arabia. And he was instrumental in overturning the Hashemi dynasty and bringing in the Saud as the governors of Saudi Arabia. He was an activist, a journalist, and believe it or not, his family, his father and mother were slaves. And they freed them and educated them, and they rose up through the ranks, mashallah. So you see Malcolm made a huge transition when he came back from Mecca. And Malcolm used to say, I never cease to be impressed by the Sudanese. And as you can see from Sheikh Najib was from Sudan, Dus Muhammad was Sudanese, Yahya Hayeri was Sudani, Ahmed Usman, Muhammad Sarur, Sheikh Ahmed Hassan, and Dr. Malik al-Badr. That's where Malcolm got his name from, Malik, from Malik Badr, mashallah. He taught at the University of Beirut for many years. And when Malcolm went to see him, because when Malcolm met him in 1959, he was Malcolm X. So Malcolm went back in the 60s and he knocked on his door and he said, who is it? He said, it's El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. And Badri said, oh, you stole my name, mashallah. So you can see that type of transition. So the question is, what brought these two men together? On the right, you see my father, El-Hajj Sham Jabar. He was the national imam for the Deen Latin Universal Arabic Association. And Malcolm X, he was the national representative of the Nation of Islam prior. So what was it that brought these two men together? His assassination. Okay, February 21st, 1965, when Malcolm was assassinated. Have you ever wondered who were the people on the stage? Okay. You see the person, Richard Jones. His name is, Hassan Mustafa. Okay. You see Abdul Razak. That was James 67X. William Bailey. He never became a Muslim. He said, I love Malcolm, Black Power platform, but I couldn't get with the religion. And Reuben Francis is the one who actually shot one of the people that were attempting to assassinate Malcolm. And of course you have Yuri Kochiyama, and of course his wife. Okay, and please Malcolm, stay alive. That is what she said. And she was Japanese. She was the only non-black in the Organization for Afro-American Unity. Okay, why did they let her in there? Because she was profound. These are some of the people on the stage. That is it. And in fact, how she became a social activist, because her family was interred during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And she spent 2 years in the internment camps. And when she came out, you know, fighting for social justice and oppression and so forth and so on. Now let's fast forward and look at the two pictures here. You see the person here is lying in the coffin? That's Hajj Malik Shabazz. And he was on display for 4 days like that. Abracadabra, he's in the Ihram. How did that happen? Why did that happen? These are the nuances that you don't catch in the books that there's actually a reason why. Because what happened was the Organization for African American Unity did not have the knowledge or the know-how to perform a janazah. They didn't know about shrouding, washing, and scenting, and the burying. So it was Ahmed Hassan and my father who actually orchestrated the shrouding, the washing, the shrouding, and the scenting of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, and actually took him from those people who didn't know how to actually bury him as a Muslim. Okay, and then we had the eulogy by Isaac Davis, and the reason why they chose Isaac Davis is because he was an entertainer, he was a journalist, and he wasn't a threat to either side, because there was a threat that went out, you know, from Malcolm's opposition, that anyone who came near Malcolm, who even thought about dealing with Malcolm, even as he was deceased, okay, would be met with violence. So they had to find someone to actually speak at his funeral, and Isaac Davis was the neutral zone, okay? And also, Ahmed Usman spoke. He actually did the eulogy first. And Spike Lee didn't put that in his movie, okay? He didn't hear what Ahmed Usman had to say, okay? And again, you know, these are some of the nuances you'll find in the book I Buried Malcolm. And if you see, it's my father standing there at the coffin, and you say, where's the Muslims? Where are the Muslims? Because they was afraid. They was afraid of the threat. However, my father's security was scattered out in the audience, okay? And this person came up on, you see, my father's left, And we know when you join a salat, you join from the what?
Right.
Right. Okay. All right. But anyway, he prayed with my father, and I asked my father who was this person. He said, I don't know. I just said, Takbir, Allah Akbar, and he walked up. MashaAllah. And the circle there, that's my mother. She was determined to be there. Whatever would happen that day, she wanted to be a part of that, you know, if a tragedy was to come. And again, you see my father standing at the grave site with Malcolm's wife standing near Betty Shabazz. And again, you look at my father, he has his hand in his abaya. And I don't have to say why he had his hand in his abaya, because he was looking for some violent outbreak. As the paper said, threats failed to materialize as followers buried Malcolm. So that's where we at. And this is Betty standing in the presence of my father at the gravesite. And 32 years later, my father was burying Betty. SubhanAllah. And that's me carrying her coffin and making sure that she had a Muslim janazah. That too was problematic, to get her body from those people and take her as a Muslim and bury her as a Muslim was very problematic. We talk about that in the book as well. And also Malika, for me, his daughter Malika, when she passed away, my brother Imam Ali, he did the janazah for her. And that's my father, Al-Haji Sharon Jabar, who actually made his way into history by championing and overriding the threats that was levied towards him, causing us to be deprived of our father for some years. So he actually had to put us in the south on the farm so we'd be far away from home, mashallah. But alhamdulillah, you know, we understood the cause and we went through that. And the second part of the book is the legacy of my father, who actually made the current report, as you see, for the National Advisory Commission for Civil Disorders, who stood between the riders, the tanks, flanked with National Guards, when the mayor gave the order, shoot to kill. So my father championed that. Leroy Jones, show of hands, who heard of Leroy Jones? Okay, right, okay. Amir Barak, my father gave him and his wife their shahada in his living room, mashallah. They took their shahada, mashallah. Lamuma Shakur, Zayd Shakur, Salahuddin Shakur, the Black Panthers. This is Lamuma Shakur. I'm sorry, this is Zayd Shakur. My father did janazah for him when he was gunned down in the police battle because they were Muslim, but they had joined the Panthers and so forth and so on. And that is us in front of the United Nations in 1971, Palestine for the Palestinian people. We championed the international platform for those people who were oppressed, mashallah. And my father went on to establish the Jihad Institute. That's me when I was about 20 years old, 21. I was one of the cadets there. And of course, we went on into Morocco. We had a foreign school there where we taught Muslims that came from America. They went there to study Islam. They went there to live and be cultivated in a Muslim environment. And my father continued to work for the Muslim World League for about 20 years as press attaché. He ended up going to Zimbabwe, 80 Muslim countries. He built 7 masjids in South Africa. He was on Randers Island when Mandela was there. He gave over 200 shahadas to the Zulu nation, mashallah. And also he established Bani Safa, which is a Latino Muslim movement today called Alianza, who's actually very progressive in calling the Latinos into Islam. And that's my father as one of the chief guys, and you can for the Hujjaj, for the Hajis, and guess who that's standing with him? That's Minister Louis Farrakhan in 1985 when he made the pilgrimage to Mecca, mashallah. And of course, we were part of the legal team fundraising for Diallo, our brother Diallo, who was murdered by the cops when he was shot 41 times. And we brought them to our community and we helped them raise funds for their legal defense, mashallah. So that's basically what I've done and what I'm doing as a da'i, as a journalist, as a historian, trying to make a narrative correction about the life and legacy of Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, and also the continuation of the work of my father, Al-Hajj Sharon Jabar. I do have books next door. If anyone is interested in purchasing a copy of the book, Marhaba Bikum, we have them next door. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If there's any questions, mashallah, I think we have a few minutes before the adhan or have it went over. Shaykhana? The adhan, how much time? time? Okay. So if you have any questions, inshallah, we can keep them brief. I don't want to overburden anyone. Like I said, that's the short version. I did a speed talk with you, mashallah. I hope that you kind of like gathered what I was trying to say. But I do have a presentation, 500 years of Islam, starting from 1492, the fall of Andalusia, all the way up to the present day, talking about you and I and our role in the Muslim world. And that's about 2 hours, so I know we don't want to go there tonight, inshallah. But alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. I'm very, very pleased to see my brothers and sister and the diversity and those who do have at least some concern about the narrative of Al-Hashmi Shiraz. So, yes, sir.
On the stage, you know, you have to keep a name, there's one name missing.
I didn't put it there, did I? I didn't put it.
Gene Roberts.
Okay, he wasn't in that first photo, he was in the second photo. I didn't put his name there. Yeah, I apologize. You know, Gene Roberts, he was actually undercover, and he actually did not testify in the trial because none of the informants were asked to testify, okay? And they discovered him in the 1975 Panther trial.
So it was 69 Panther 10 trial.
I'm sorry, 1969 Panther 10 trial. He came up and he had to confess. And one of the questions they asked him was, were you responsible for killing Malcolm? They asked him that question. That's him, you see at the top?
Yeah, but on the stage, when he was on stage,
He's not here.
There he is.
Where?
His name is not there.
He's right there on the right there, at the top.
I mean, he started at the top, you know what I'm saying? No, the other one. Right there. He's there, but he's not named.
Where is he? I can't see.
Right here.
Say again?
Can you see it?
Touch him? Okay.
It's not there?
I can see it. I see Abdul Razak. Should I touch him?
What's him right there?
That's Abdul Razak. That's James 67X.
Man, Dave, you know what he looked like? It looks exactly
Yeah,
like
see, that's Gene Roberts here. At the top, the light skin.
Man, they look like almost like twins. Right?
Yeah. Okay, that's right.
Because he was kneeling there.
Yeah, he actually came on the stage. There's a few photos with him, but that photo is not him. Yes.
He said, no, 10, right. I mean, he was working with all.
Yeah, he was actually.
Infiltrating several groups. Yeah. Okay. Could be.
Yeah, they blow up some buildings and all this stuff. Yeah. Okay, but he was discovered in that as an undercover, but because none of the, you know, there's a book that's coming out called it's not who killed Malcolm. No, it's not who killed Malcolm. Okay, but why Malcolm was killed and who wanted him dead, and all that information is outlined in that particular book.
Also, it's a brother named Abdul Rahman. He's from your area. He's got a 6-part documentary, and in the documentary, they use some of the information in that document. He spent more than almost 20 years doing the research, and he uncovered with the stuff he uncovered, because there were, according to FBI documents, J. Edgar Hoover had 9 informants in the room at the time of the assassination, plus Gene Roberts. That's 10, right?
Right.
And so that's 10 people who watched the assassination, who was given instructions to keep their mouth shut.
You're right. Now, one thing that we emphasize in the book that's important, and is that is Malcolm Islam, Malcolm becoming Muslim. And I try to make a distinction between Malcolm X and Al-Hajj Jabar. Because what happens is Malcolm recanted a lot of his beliefs. And he said he was regretful for a lot of the things that he had taught, to the people. Because he had reached that epiphany. Malcolm said that he wanted to work with the Muslim world and those people who were oppressed. See, what happens is if you read half of the book of Malcolm, then you're going to be a black nationalist. If you start at, 50 pages, okay. If you read 100 pages, you're going to be a Pan-Africanist, okay? But if you read the entire book, you will see when Malcolm reinvented himself. So the important thing is that as Muslims, we have to claim Malcolm as a Muslim. And like as I mentioned, the Shahada is negation and an affirmation. What did Malcolm leave off? We need to know that because everyone is looking at Malcolm as he is, and they are looking through the lens of Alex Haley, the autobiography of Malcolm X. You know what I'm saying? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala counts your good. If once you become a Muslim, all the good that you did, Allah counts that. And He forgives you of your sins and your transgressions on the Shahada. Now what happens is that what part did Malcolm leave off is what we have to leave off, or we should never embrace. Case in point, Malcolm was at a time when Africa was going through decolonization. Okay? And that means that the African states were fighting against the Western Europeans who had come in and colonized them, what they call at the Berlin Conference, where they decided how they're going to split up Africa. So they was going through a decolonization period. However, they were choosing another ally, which was a socialist, communist platform. Because Russia came in and took all of those concessions, okay? So Malcolm himself was looking at that before he took the Shahada and before he made that transition as an alternative to Western capitalism, okay? But when he went to Ghana during his second trip, President Johnson sent a telex. Well, it came from the president's office, okay? Because they never put their signature on things like that. For Nkrumah not to entertain that destiny, or that person of descent and so forth. So Malcolm realized that they had traded one master for what? Another master. And he began to see that even socialism and communism was an element of control. Anyone ever read or heard of Fran Fanon? Yes. The Wretched of the Earth? Yeah. Did you know he was an atheist? Yeah. He was an atheist. And he said religion was the problem. But he is buried in the grave of the Shuhada. That's exactly. How is that possible? So a lot of the philosophy that Malcolm was propagating, because in a lot of times at the Audubon Ballroom, when he had his lectures, he would have a communist or a socialist to open up. So they would see, but then Malcolm told Imam Muhammad Muhammad himself that now I am a Muslim. So these two institutions, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the OAU, he said, I do not see them as permanent institutions. You see, so Malcolm was constantly growing. You can't just put your hand on and say, this is the Malcolm. No, he was transcending a lot of those ideas and philosophies that he had. You see what I'm saying? So we have to, that's why it's important that the people know that he's a Muslim, because a lot of people just read the autobiography and they become Muslim. Alhamdulillah. People saw Muhammad Ali in the ring and say, I'm a Muslim. See how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired people to look at Islam and guided them through Islam through those gates. And they were in the nation. So I'm saying that when a person get into Islam, okay, and start examining and learning about the aqidah, the beliefs and the practice, stuff like that, then they will say, wow, Oh, this what Malcolm was, you stuck on Alex Haley now. So now you become an oppositionist to Malcolm because you don't know El-Hajj Malik Shabazz. So that's what we're trying to do, to show those people that Malcolm X, a man that was that profound, okay, humbled himself and came to worship his Lord correctly. He said it was the first time that he had felt his humanity when he was in Mecca. So that was the game changer for him. So that's the part that we're trying. There are a whole lot of other material around his life, the conspiracy, the rings who killed him, the FBI, CIA, all of these people, I mean, any opposition. Marcus Garvey, he was incarcerated, okay? And he was teaching Pan-Africanism. Dr. King was assassinated. He was talking about civil rights, Medgar Evers. You know, look at the Panthers, you know, Hammonds. All of these, anytime there were any type of different view from this society, then you had someone that would come after you. As I mentioned in our organization, we have 617 declassified FBI files on our organization. And we started in 1936. And it's no telling how many people have lost their lives with ruled off as being accidental, okay, that was intentionally killed for that. So mashallah, we know that only one person died that day on the stage with Malcolm. So that should give us some kind of, you know, outlook about that and, you know, the conspiracy around his death. However, we recognize him as a Muslim, and Allah tells us, do not speak of those who have died in his way as being dead. They are alive, even though you don't perceive it.
Wow.
Mashallah. Yes, sir. Please,
Good to see you. I read the book of
Mhm.
about 3 times.
Alhamdulillah.
Long way about how, you know, you and your family preserve this knowledge, this history. 2 things. Could you speak to your experience as a cadet? And what was it like going for the body of Lady Shabazz to honor her?
Bismillah. You know, as a cadet, you know, one thing about growing up as a Muslim in America, I was in, when I went to school in New York, there were 600 students in the school. I was the only Muslim. The only Muslim. Can you imagine that? That's unthinkable today. I don't know. So I had to make, every day I had to make critical choices how I was going to be a Muslim. How I was going to circumvent the gangs, how I was going to do this and do that, so forth and so on, the drugs and all this stuff. And what happened was that the person that sit on my right in the classroom, over a period of year, he took Shahada. The person that was sitting on my left, over a period of year, he took Shahada. And my gym class, I was sitting in the gym class one day and I heard the gym instructor say, Abdul Hamid. And I looked behind me, it was a brother from Yemen. And we caught him and we all was like, it was like 4 of us, we was Muslim. And I used to wear my fez, as you know, my father used to wear the red fez. And when I turned 12, I remember him bringing, I came to his house, and I mentioned he was in the south, out of harm's way. And my eyes was like on the fez, because he used to always wear it, he used to pop up with the red fez. So I took the fez, he said, look, if you put it on, you can't never take it off. You can't never take it off. So I was in school, and they had a rule saying you can't wear caps, hats, and things like that. So I'm sitting up in the classroom, and my English teacher, she was Jewish, she said, Jabar, you have to remove your hat. And I said, it's not a hat. She said, it's a hat. I said, it's not. So we went back and forth. So she went and got the dean. So the dean came in the classroom, and lo and behold, he was wearing a yarmulke. I said, this is a victory for me. So he came in, and he came over to me, and he asked me why I wear the tie. I said, because I'm a Muslim. And he went back and told the teacher, said he can wear the fez. And there was a Hebrew Israelite that used to sit beside me as well, not beside me in the same class. He used to take his fez off. When I got the victory, he took his fez and he put it back on his head, mashallah. But I made an assessment of my life growing up in New York and navigating the streets, and that's why I wrote the book Calling Me Muslim. And I was a cadet leader because we was really proud to be Muslim and things like that, and we would go out and get delinquent kids that parents had problems with and things like that, and didn't want to go to school, didn't want to do this, that, and they would assign them to the Masjid, and we would take 90 days He said, give us this kid for 90 days. And we would change their perception of life, and we made men out of them. That was my experience as a cadet, you know, and everybody taught martial art, everybody was trained in martial art. It was just a certain type of internal discipline we had. And when Betty Shabazz, Yarhamahullah, passed away, we knew the politics was in it. My father, he was aging at that time. He was kind of ill. In fact, he was sick. So he called me up that morning and said, I want you to go to New York to Imam Agwa. He was the Imam of Islamic Center in New York. And he said, I want you to explain to him who this lady is. And to tell him that she is one of the daughters of the struggle, and it would take someone who understands this struggle, okay, to actually explain the profundity of this lady in our culture. And the immigrant didn't have that type of resume to do that. So of course I followed my father's order. I went there and he said, well, Sheikh Muhammad, he said, I was a little younger then, 90-something. He said, Muhammad, he said, I don't control this situation. He said, this is what they have ordered, and this is what has to be. So we stayed on him, and we did a press conference that morning before we went to get the body, and my father said, look, he said, this is deja vu. We went through this with Malcolm. Okay, so we're going to get the body. So we had about 40 of us. So I went back again, and the Shabazz family, they was all up already, it was mourning and everything. So I had to go in their presence and console them, to tell them about Islam and, you know, the conduct of Allah, and, you know, their mother was a Muslim, and we have to bury, and, you know, and they was all ladies. There's no men in it. And I think Malcolm, he wasn't in the group, but Malik and all that, they were there, but they was young, 19 years old. So finally, Akwa, Imam said, okay, I'm going to do the takbir, but y'all got it after that. So what happened was, after we did the janazah, it became like a finale. All the politicians and entertainers, you know, everybody was there, and we had made a plan. As soon as he salam out, we're going to claim the body, because they had planned a memorial for her in a church with, you know, everybody sing, you know, with that kind of thing. So the security came up to us and said, okay, we want y'all to move and leave the masjid. Yeah, we knew that was the way they were going to take the coffin and run into the church. And it was like, no, we went nowhere. So we said, and they went, the girls came over, his daughter said, we want to mourn our mother. He said, okay, you can mourn your mother. We had our grip on the coffin, and we did not turn that coffin loose. And as you see, when we exited the masjid and went up, it's nothing but Muslims carrying that coffin. And we were like moving people out the way. And we had to actually open the hearse and put her in there and say, let's go to Hartsdale, New York, to the firm-tiff grave, and we're going to bury her. And we took charge of that. And when we got there, and I don't know if you can see the pictures in the book, we're actually doing the death and the interment, and the daughters was like really upset. You know, like the still face, like y'all took our mother, because they didn't know how this thing worked, you know what I'm saying? And before it was over with, Allah be my witness, they was muddy, they had shovels, they was throwing dirt on their mother. And that night, I got a call from one of the daughters, I think it was Ilyasa. She called and said, look, we want you to come to the memorial. I said, I can't come to the memorial. You know, but they appreciated what we did. Even to this day, when they do the anniversary from Malcolm X, they always call me and my brother to come in and speak on his behalf as a Muslim, as my father did until his demise. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah.
Inshallah.